Hi guys, hope you're well. Good to see you. New phone to video on, so hopefully this video will be better than the other ones. I'm just still figuring out how it all works, but seems to be working all right. Welcome back to our Embrace. We've got 5 more weeks till Christmas, and I've managed to speak with Jess Finlow, and she's going to do our final session the week before we break up for schools for Christmas. So you've got me for the next 4 weeks. So I've been praying and going, okay, what should we do? And I thought, well, let's stop talking about issues. Let's delve into our Bibles. I've got my big one here. I'm using my big one today. I've also got my little one here as well. And I've also got my notes on my laptop. So I no doubt will be sort of checking out my laptop to check on my notes. Obviously, usually I have them written out in front of me, but I've got it on my laptop today. So we're going to be looking at the book of Colossians in the New Testament. So I'd love you to pause me, go and grab your Bibles and give Colossians chapter 1 a read. It's got 4 chapters, and we're going to be doing a chapter every week for the next 4 weeks. So pause me, go and read it in your Bibles. Cheers. So Colossians. Who wrote it? When was it written? It was written AD 60, by Paul. And you'll hopefully know the story of Paul. He was Saul, and he was out persecuting, rounding up the Christians. And then he basically God worked in him, and he became a Christian. And he's basically started leading the church. And this letter was written to the church in Colossae. So it's written to the people in the church in Colossians. And Paul writes it from prison. It's one of his many prison letters. And another fact about Colossians is the letter to Philemon. Philemon, however you want to pronounce it. Philemon was a member of the church in Colossae. So this letter is similar to the letter written to him. And we actually find out at the end of Philemon that Paul speaks about a guy called Epaphras, who is in prison with him when he writes to the geezer Philemon. And Epaphras is the guy who has set up the church in Colossae. We don't really know much about him. He must have become a Christian, probably one of converted by Paul, and he's gone and set this church up. And he's then gone and seen Paul. Paul hasn't been to Colossae. Paul's never met the church, but he's writing a letter to them. Epaphras has come and spoken to him at some point, probably whilst Paul is in Rome. There's some debate, was Epaphras in prison? It seems in Philemon that Epaphras was in prison with Paul at some point, but we're not too sure at this exact point. General consensus is he probably wasn't with Paul in prison at this point, but had come and spoken to Paul and told Paul about the church, but also about the problems they were having in the church. And there's this book, only 4 chapters long, addresses the 2 main problems. And the 2 main problems are these. Problem 1 was polytheism, try that word, which is the belief of many gods. And obviously, I've been under Roman rule, and there were lots of Roman gods, and some people in the church in Colossae were just adding Jesus to their list of gods. They had a whole list of gods, they were adding Jesus. And actually, when we were at church in Crawley, there was a large Hindu community, and there were a number of Hindus who would come to church and would just add Jesus to their list of gods. And it was like, no, Jesus is the one true God. So there's this stuff being said in the church, but also in the church, there are Jews who have converted to Christianity, have decided to follow Jesus, but are saying in the church that the Jewish law, new Christians, so the Gentiles, those who aren't Jewish, that those Gentile converts to Christianity actually should adopt some of the old Torah laws, things like circumcision and what have you. And Paul is then writing to them to say, no, this is an issue. So let's dive straight in. So straight into chapter 1, Paul introduces himself. The people in the church will know of him. He was well known. He, as I said, Epaphras, we think, is probably one of the conversions. He's come to faith under Paul. And in verse 4 and 5, we see Paul talk about how pleased he is with the church because of their faith, love and hope. And there's one word that he doesn't mention, and that is knowledge. Because it's thought as well that at this time there were people in that church who had a thing called Gnostic begins with the letter G. Gnosticism, so sort of like knowledge is more important than anything else. I know more about the old. So like the Jewish converts would be going, well, we know more about the Torah. We have this knowledge. So Paul's making the point here that actually it's not about the knowledge, personal knowledge. It's about faith, love and hope. And then we get into verse 9 and he mentions knowledge, but it's the knowledge of his will, of Jesus's will. It's the knowledge of Jesus. And then he wants them to be filled with the knowledge, and that then that knowledge, they will be filled with that knowledge through spiritual wisdom and understanding. It's not about accumulating knowledge. It's about using your knowledge of Jesus to actually impact your life and change the way you live and how you act and how you treat others. So it's about knowledge that isn't just head knowledge. It's knowledge that affects your whole being. It affects how you are. It affects your personality. It affects who you care for and who you love. It's not just head knowledge. It's head knowledge, and then there's the action. And actually, for us as Christians today, that's a really valid point. We know all this stuff about Jesus. If you've been going to church for years, I've been going to church for 20 odd years now. I know lots of stuff. But that, so what? If that doesn't affect me, if that doesn't change how I am, if I don't try to be more like Jesus, if I don't use my knowledge of Jesus to change the way I am and that affect me day to day. And that is an ongoing process, and that will be an ongoing process for the rest of my life, that I will want to be more like Jesus. I will want to love people. I will want to have the hope for people. I will have that growing faith in Jesus for the rest of my life, and that knowledge isn't head knowledge. It's head and heart and hand knowledge. So Paul's making this point that it's the knowledge of Jesus that should affect us, and then goes into verse 15. And verse 15 to verse 20 is written as a poem. I wasn't aware of this. It's amazing what you read when you if you delve into this, what you find out about it. It's written as a poem, and it's written as two bits, verse 15, 16, and then verse 17. And verse 15 and verse 17 are sort of similar. It's sort of broke into two bits. The first bit of those verses is all about Jesus being the creator of everything. Paul has said it's not head knowledge, it's head, heart and hand knowledge. And then he's given them the knowledge. So the knowledge is that Jesus is the creator of all, number one. Jesus is on an equal stepping with God. Jesus is God. He is the same being. But then also the second bit of those verses is about Jesus is bringing a new creation. Yes, Jesus is the creator. God is the creator. But actually there's a new creation, and that creation is the people. That is all people. And he brings about that new creation because of his death and his resurrection, that we can put right with God. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, bung me a message, shove a message underneath here, give me a call. We can chat it through a bit more. So Paul then ends this chapter by mentioning his suffering and writes about how he is suffering in prison. But he's not suffering in a bad way. He says how he is rejoicing and he is joyful in his suffering. Why? Because he's suffering because that's what Jesus wants him to happen to him. Jesus has put him in that situation where he's been speaking about Jesus, and he is suffering for the church. And therefore that shouldn't be a negative thing, although we see suffering as a bad thing. But Paul is joyful that he is suffering, because clearly it means that the Roman authorities are not happy with him because he's spreading the word of Jesus. And that's where we end chapter 1. So hope that helps. Hope it explains it a bit more. Please read chapter 2 ready for next week. Then you'll have to pause me midway through. So this next week, read chapter 2, Colossians chapter 2. So I'll be back next week. Keep well, stay safe. See you soon. Bye.